This is what a Linux tablet should be, and let me tell you why. The hardware is great, the implementation of Linux is outstanding, and honestly, I would rather grab this than an iPad, Android, or even that overpowered Windows tablet that I have. This is Juno Computers' new Juno Tab 3, and it markets itself as being the most compatible Linux tablet on the market. But first, what is Juno Computers? Juno Computers is a British-American company started back in 2017 that originally shipped laptops running elementary OS with their Apollo line of laptops. Since then, they switched from elementary OS to Ubuntu, but have expanded into a wide range of laptops, desktops, and even with a wide selection of Linux distribution options that you can pick on purchase. And they sell these things in UK, Europe, Canada, and the United States. Do note they did send this to me for free to make content around, but no money changed hands. And before we take a deep dive into this thing, I would like to thank our sponsor, Skillshare. I've been wanting to up my skills in many things I do every day in my home lab, and I've started the Coding 101 Python for Beginners course, and that has been incredibly helpful. And when I'm done with that, I'll even go into some of the more advanced stuff, such as TCP/IP socket programming, and I should probably do some project management classes. You probably already know this, but Skillshare is the largest learning community, led by industry experts across film, illustration, design, freelance, productivity, and more. Skillshare can help you take your career skills, hobbies, passion, or side hustles to the next level. This November, Skillshare is exploring the theme of gratitude, so I am grateful to all of you. It is my personal duty to expand my knowledge on the topics we cover here on the channel to try to better serve you. Now with that, the first 500 people to use the link down below will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So go ahead, click it down below and get started today. So before we dive to why you're probably here, and that's the Linux experience on this thing, let's first talk about the hardware we got loaded up on here. I am going to cover it, but if you want to look right there, there you go. This 1.74 pound tablet ships with the Intel N100 CPU, which we have covered on this channel previously. And as a budget CPU, it is great. They are incredibly power efficient, which is something you want from a tablet. And speaking of power efficiency, with the device at 100%, I was pulling 7.5 watts out of the wall when it was just sitting on desktop mode. And then when I went ahead and did something a little more intensive, I ran a Geekbench benchmarking test. And during the multi-core testing, it did max out at 16.2 watts at that 100%. With the battery at a lower power, so it was actively trying to charge, on desktop it was pulling about 25 watts, and then it maxed at 32 watts under load. Now, since I did use Geekbench to test the power consumption, I might as well share those Geekbench results with you. The tablet had a single core score of just about 1100 with a multi-core score of 2700, and this was running Mobian. The comparison, the other N100 device I have is the UN100L. This running Windows scored slightly higher on the single core score, and actually pretty considerably lower on the multi-core score with about a 500 point difference. And just for comparison's sake to the N200, which is a little more expensive, a little more powerful CPU, single core score saw about a 200 point boost, while the multi-core score saw about a 600 point boost. Now with a mobile device like this, probably one of the most important things is the battery life. Are you going to have to plug it in all the time to actually use the thing? And with this, no, not really. The battery is 5,000 milliamps at 38 watt hours. And one thing I must mention, the standby life of this thing is crazy good. When it actually suspends, it barely uses any power. I left it over a weekend, so I think Friday morning, I put it in a drawer. It was technically on, and then when I came back Sunday night, I think it lost about 20% power, going from 70 to 50. Now for actually testing the battery capabilities, I did what I usually do on a tablet like this, and that is consume media. So during the election that just happened, I went ahead, loaded up Twitch on the Zen browser to go ahead and watch a live stream starting at 100%. It took about 4.5 hours of a 1080p stream going, about 50% brightness, full volume, for it to drop from that 100% to right about 5%. Juno Computers estimates about 6 hours of battery life off of normal use, such as general web browsing, document editing, things like that. I didn't test that specifically, but based on it running media for that long, I believe it. Now, if you primarily want to use this as a laptop with the keyboard attachment, which it does come with, you don't have to buy it separately. This is it right here. Do note the N100 is not as performant as a laptop or a Windows laptop that you can get in this price range. For example, some of the newer i3 devices are pretty good at about $600. But the company does spend a lot of work on the software side to optimize the hardware as best as they can to work with Linux, which is great. That said, the power benefit you get from these N100s is a huge advantage, and another nice thing, at least to me, is this is a x86 based system, so you're not going to have as much compatibility issues compared to some of the ARM CPU tablets on the market. The screen is very nice. I just checked for updates. You can see all kinds of binary firmware updates. This thing is rocking a 60 Hz 2K IPS display, which comes in about 12.1 inches. It does have 12 gigabytes of RAM, and that is the default amount of RAM, which is decent. Especially for a tablet like this, it does start with 512 gigabytes of SSD storage. This is the 512, but there is a 1 terabyte and 2 terabyte variant. And when you buy this thing, you get a wide variety of Linux distributions installed, such as Mobian, Ubuntu, Kubuntu, KDE Neon, or Debian Trixie. So with that, let's look at the I/O of this device. Right over here, we have an SD card reader as well as a mini HDMI, or micro HDMI, apologies. We have two USB-Cs. These are 3.1 with one of them being data transfer only, and then the other one supporting charging and video out up to 4K at that 60 Hertz. If we look over here, we have a small headphone jack, we have our power button, a volume rocker. There's a speaker on this side as well as a speaker on the other side. One thing that I have to note is the labeling on the back here for the USB-Cs and the I/O did get misprinted, so the DC and Type-C are switched. Not a big deal, but something to note. It's a first batch issue, and they said it's going to be resolved in the next one. You probably saw right here, it does have a rear camera. This is at 3.7 megapixels. 3.7, I do wish it was a larger sensor. That's very low for a $600 tablet. And just when you thought it couldn't get any lower, the webcam here on the front, or the front-facing camera, is a 2 megapixel camera. All right, so here's the front camera. Definitely wish it was better. It's nice you have it, but I definitely, if I was going to do a conference call, I'd want to plug something else in. I'm like 4, maybe 3 feet away from the camera right now. It is squished in on my face, and I don't know how it sounds, but now you do, so hopefully it's not horrible. Here's the rear camera running video. Now, like we said earlier, it does ship with the keyboard, which is very nice. And depending on your operating system, obviously, when you attach it and detach it, it switches between a tablet and a more kind of desktop-friendly laptop mode. And you probably saw it has a rear cover. So that's it without its rear cover. To use it as a stand, you just pop this, fold this down, just like you'd expect. This keyboard is very similar to something that you'd get from like the Microsoft Surface tablets. Quality and feel is incredibly similar. Touchpad works really good with multi-touch gestures. It click-clacks pretty nice. It's definitely not no like MacBook keyboard, but it's good nonetheless. I have enjoyed using it over the last few weeks. Now, the operating system that I have been using most on this device is Mobian with the Phosh desktop interface, or mobile interface. Mobian and Phosh is what shipped on the very first Pine phone that I went ahead and ordered. And when I got that, my initial impressions of Phosh was it's cool, but it sucked. And after using this for a little bit, I've come to the realization that is not because Phosh itself sucked. What really sucked is the specs of the Pine phone. Putting it on something a little with a little more power in it makes it a wonderful mobile experience. I'm going to do kind of walk through a little bit later, but what I will say now is compared to the last Linux tablet video I made, which was doing an install on a Windows tablet, this operating system or this interface has solved many of the issues that I've complained about previously, with the most notable one being the actual keyboard on this works great, and I don't have to do any extra tinkering or screwing around with it. Giovanni, the founder of Juno Computers, when he sent this over to me, it's actually pre-installed with 2 different distributions to try out, with the other one being KDE Neon with Plasma Mobile, and we will dive into that when I do the quick little walkthrough. Do note there's a lot going on. I could do whole separate videos on each individual operating system, so I'm not going to go into every single little thing, just kind of a demo of some of the gestures and whatnot. But before that, I want to talk about the boot system on here, which is nice. When I first booted it, I was greeted with REFIND, or the Refined Boot Manager. It's an awesome free and open source boot manager that can automatically detect all EFI systems on a computer, and it presents those systems in a really nice kind of graphical interface when the computer first turns on. Really nice. I was impressed with that. BIOS is standard AMI BIOS. There's nothing really going on in there, and actually the founder of them recommended to me not to mess too much with the BIOS, because if I accidentally change the wrong thing or configure something wrong, I can brick it, which I don't want to do because I actually like using this thing. So live demos, let's go a little bit backwards here and check out KDE Plasma Mobile first, and then we'll go to my preference, which has been Mobian. And here we are. This is KDE Plasma Mobile. I'm just going to kind of walk through it so you can see the mobile interface here. Really complex password I got going on, so let's log on into our system. And this is what you're greeted with. You do have a bottom dock on this system that you could pin some things. So for example, if I swipe up here, I get my app drawer. So let's say theoretically I wanted to pin Firefox down there, just drag, drop it, boom, and we could also pin things. So if I wanted my, let's say the Discover store, I could put that on the desktop here. So you do have some customization in that regard, differing from Phosh, which I really haven't noticed as much there at least. And this is a pretty simple interface. So if I go ahead and open a couple things, let's open up Firefox, go out, let's open up the Zen browser, go out, let's open up the Discover store. This was already open. It's trying to catch up here. So open up the Discover store, and there we go. We're now in everything. We have the keyboard up here. If I go over here, we have the switch for the emojis, if that's something you need. And when it comes to that, there's really not much else going on. I mean, you can hold down to access these different characters with accents if you need them. But let's see, if I hold this down, it does give us some options. Swipe to move the cursor, double tap to enter selection mode. We have cut, copy, paste here. But if I go ahead and go back, or it goes back automatically, we're back onto the keyboard. Keyboard works pretty good, and you can see if I flip it here, it is going to automatically rotate, and it does it really well. So it is usable. I do wish it kind of had a little bit more customization options that we see with something like Windows, where it has the feature where you can have it floating or have it go smaller in a corner, so then I can use like one finger to type. But this is good for what it is. Now, if I go ahead and hit that to get rid of the keyboard, you can see we have full Discover with all the different Linux apps. Again, this is an x86 system, so we have full compatibility with all of the various apps. Granted, some of them don't have touch support, which is something you're going to run into, so not all of the apps here are going to support that. But if I go over here and hit this square, just like with Android, it's going to give us the multitask view, so we can see everything that's going on. And of course, we can swipe up to go ahead and get rid of things if we would like to, or hit close all just to get rid of absolutely everything. And you can see it is pretty responsive here. If I go to an actual web page that I can zoom in on, so let's go to my GitHub page. You can see it didn't automatically resize it. So if I just double tap, or theoretically, there we go. Now it is. So if I go over here, this is a list thing that I'm someday going to finish, but it's pretty responsive. It works really good. Obviously, this is application dependent, so Firefox has pretty decent touch gestures. 3-finger swipe up, we have access to our desktops, so we can open up another one, boom, and then if I do a 3-finger swipe up again, this is how you manage your various desktops, in addition to having multitasking, which I believe if I open up something else here in this desktop, so let's open up Discover again, let that open all the way, do a 3-finger up. You can see on this desktop we have Firefox and Discover running. If I go over to this desktop, we have a whole different thing going on, so you can manage your multitasking thing that way. And you saw briefly, if I go ahead and get rid of this, you can float the windows, or theoretically. It might be dependent on the actual window, so let's go over to Firefox, try to drag that, there we go. So you can float the windows, and then obviously getting the keyboard here and popping it on, it does automatically switch to desktop mode. So now I can drag and do kind of typical KDE things that you'd expect, obviously with the mobile interface on. And you notice when I am in the desktop mode, it doesn't automatically bring up like the minimize, maximize things. So I still need to kind of swipe things away like that. And like this one here, if I'm able to, so get rid of that. If I'm able to, I don't think so. So some of the apps allow for the desktop mode and some of them do not, at least in my kind of initial testing here. But overall, it's a pretty good and fluid experience. The last thing I'll kind of touch on with Plasma is this you briefly saw. I'm going to bring this over here so you can see a little bit better. We have some of our, mobile friendly options here. So Wi-Fi, mobile data, Bluetooth. We have the option to enable and disable auto rotate, airplane mode, battery stuff, screenshot. You can enable or disable the virtual keyboard here if you don't want it to pop up while you're in kind of the tablet mode. We have dock mode and night color, so I can enable that if I'd like to, which is very nice. And we have like caffeine and all that kind of built in. So this has a lot more options than you'll see in like Phosh, which we will go ahead and dive into now. So to get out of here, I believe we go shut down, and then we are going to restart this. And then we see the Juno splash screen, and here we could go over, select our Debian system. You could only really do that. The touch screen doesn't work in that boot menu or this boot menu, so you need the keyboard if you do want multiple distributions on here to be able to switch back and forth between those. So here we are in Mobian. I'm going to log in here, type in my password, boop, and then we are in. Now this one doesn't have a desktop, kind of how KDE Plasma does. I know there is a way to get to kind of just a blank wallpaper, but you're greeted with this right here. I have Firefox up here, which is just a pinned app. And let's say I want to pin Telegram desktop. I add it to favorites there, and then it's going to show up there. So slightly different than KDE. If I open a couple things, so let's open up Firefox. Oh, there's our desktop. You can't really do anything with it. It's just a background for kind of visual effect. Let's swipe up. You can see when I swipe up, I have both the multitask view as well as access to my app drawer. So if I opened up something else, such as maps here, give that a minute. There you go, it opens up. And now if I drag up, you can see both Firefox and the maps. And just like before, I can close things out just by swiping up. And then instead of taking me to the desktop, it's going to take me to this kind of app drawer view. Now, real quick, I'm going to take off the keyboard. So let's pop that off here. So then I can show you what the keyboard looks like. So if I open something back up, such as Firefox here, give that a second to open. This is what the keyboard looks like. It's a little bit more simplistic. If you do hold the letters, you don't really get anything going on. I mean, it looks prettier, but definitely not as much things going on as the KDE Plasma one. If I hit the numbers, this is how you switch between that. If I hit this little world view, this is going to give us options such as the emoji keyboard, so we could go ahead and go over there. Or if we go over to terminal, this gives us a little bit more options. So we have escape, tab, control, some extra keys, the arrow keys that you're going to need kind of in that environment. And I do believe there's a way to set that as the default. Let's actually go try to find that real quick. If we go over to settings, again, this is just GNOME. It's very familiar if you spent time in that system. But if I go over to, let's say, keyboard here, these are our input sources, US. Oh, there it is, I'm blind. So we have mobile settings right here, whole separate application. If we go to welcome. So here you can enable settings such as Wi-Fi hotspot, mobile data. We have applications, so this is where we can organize our favorites, reset our favorites, do a web app or mobile app filtering. We do feedback here, which this is where we would set various sounds for mobile specific things. Compositor here. Some applications on especially a mobile screen, this one is a larger tablet, so it wouldn't really be much of an issue, but if you do have issues, you can scale them down through here. Lock screen settings, so you can enable various things or disable things here. So like Ticketbox, for example, show PDF on lock screen, really similar to like Apple Cards or Apple Wallet, where if you have an event ticket, you can have it show up. No docks detected, on-screen keyboard. Here, there is really not a lot of settings. You can enable or disable it. Unfold, long press, so not a lot going on. I definitely wish there was more keyboard settings here. Same with KDE Mobile. Here we have our sensors, so there's no proximity sensor available, light, orientation. We have some contrast settings. And then right here, experimental features. So you can enable or disable emergency calls if that's supported on your hardware. And we can suspend it via the system menu. So those are our mobile settings. See, it's Phosh mobile settings, pretty specific. But if we close that out, again, this is the system that I have actually been using more than KDE Plasma personally, just because I like it. It feels a little more mobile first integrated. This is the system I ran like the benchmark testing, the battery testing on, and all that. So I don't quite know if KDE Plasma will perform a little bit better. But ultimately, it's very nice. If I open up usage here, you can see about half the storage is showed because the other half is given to Plasma. Processor, just on light use, it's really not using any system resources at all. And the memory usage out of the gate is 1.8, which is pretty common with a Linux GNOME system. So get out of there. And some other applications, just while we're here, that I've kind of been playing around with. I have the Jellyfin Media Player here. We've got Zen Browser. I've been using GIMP on here, which actually has been working pretty good for being mobile first. So there it goes. It's open, and you can see full GIMP application, access to everything, and the scaling is perfect for touch, which is nice. So you can easily create new projects here, and hold down, do a gradient, whoop, boom, easy peasy. Close this out here. Just like that. Do note, it force closes it, so it's not like, do you want to save this project? That's not there. But yeah, overall, this has been a really good experience. Again, if I go over here, I do have some settings. We kind of went over this. We have the volume, brightness. If I go right here, we can change the output devices. We can lock it here, or we can hit this little button to power it down. So overall, I am incredibly impressed with this device. For the last few weeks, it has been kind of my bedside device that at night I'll go use it, answer some emails, watch a movie or some content on it. The UI is so fluid and easy to use that after actually kind of getting into what I'm doing, I forget that I'm using a Linux tablet, which has been hard to say about other devices similar to this one. And after trying this out, I do kind of want to install Phosh on that Minisform tablet, so just an overkill tablet, and see what I could do with it in that regard. That would be kind of cool. But as far as a Linux device is concerned, this is truly it. He, dare I say, is him. With the battery life and lower power consumption, I can't see me using this over even more powerful devices. Combined with the screen it has on it, it looks beautiful. I am looking forward to making more content around this, maybe testing out some various Linux-based mobile operating systems and using this as kind of my testing platform. And one thing that's in development that I'm also looking forward to is Android Auto support for this guy specifically. I went ahead and ordered a little GPS dongle to use with this, so I may be covering that in a future video. At $600, I have to say it is kind of a hard sell when you are only looking at the specifications of the device, but you are supporting a company that is really pushing free and open source software and is actively developing this to make mobile Linux experiences better. With that said, a link to this will be down below if you want to do a little bit more research on it or anything else that I happen to have mentioned in this video. And finally, have a beautiful day. Until next time, goodbye.